Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 69.
Oh.
Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
I'm Lynn.
And we are your guides to the hardly helpful stories, literally, literarily littering the Bible.
You didn't tell me this was episode 69 on purpose.
Excuse me, 69.
Well, that makes part of this podcast make way more sense.
Right. This one was a little sexier than normal, I suppose. Yeah.
Just in parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we're covering 1 Kings chapter 1 specifically. No. We are just covering that first chapter.
First chapter.
Yeah.
First sexy chapter.
Yeah.
Nothing about this book was sexy.
Well,
that's not true. There is a beautiful girl involved.
There is.
But there was no sex.
No, according to the Bible. So strap in and strap on for episode 69. Bosom Buddies.
Makes that pull-out game weak. Because she was very beautiful. Type of girl you'd want to impregnate.
Impregnate. Gotta lock that shit down.
Children, God's handcuffs.
Even God's mistakes are great.
It's a present from Satan himself.
Yeah. Anyway, so previously on BSFA, we covered the end of First Chronicles, and we got a bunch of boring bullshit with names and vague brags about bags of swag for the temple. And
how long did you work on that one?
It was like 3 hours. Chronicles version of Solomon becoming king. So that's, he became king twice, actually.
Yeah, that seems to be standard.
Twice. Yeah, it was an odd thing. And then Chronicles version of David's death, which I said in the last episode that we were covering David's death today, and we're actually not.
Ugh,
we're actually covering.
You're a liar.
I know. Well, I got into this, and then I was like, let's just cover this one chapter.
Oh, wow. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to the one a couple episodes ago. Not as interesting as that grand inconsistency.
Put your seatbelts on.
But still kind of an interesting chapter and stuff like that we're covering today.
And a chapter is one paragraph?
No.
Oh.
Wow, we're really going back to the beginning of this podcast.
I know. I'm so sorry. I can never remember how they're actually like. I know
broken up.
You've said it.
Yeah, chapters can be like a couple pages.
Okay. I feel like I ask this question like every 5 episodes, and it may sound like I'm doing it for like new listeners, but no.
Just Lindsay forgets.
Not. I just don't remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are kind of getting to that age.
Yeah. I think it's more that I actually don't
give a shit.
Care. Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. And you're not the one reading the Bible.
No.
I am.
No, this podcast would never happen if it was reliant on me to do anything.
Right. Yeah.
Except show up to record the podcast.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, chapters normally last a couple of pages.
Okay. What denotes a chapter? Like, how do you know it's a chapter?
Because there's a number. That's a chapter number.
I thought,
There's the big number.
I got
when you're flipping through the Bible, and you see the big numbers.
And sometimes that is a paragraph, right? I think that's where I'm getting confused.
No, I think the shortest chapter in the Bible is probably still more than one paragraph.
Okay.
But
what are the little things broken?
Little ones are verses.
Verses.
Right. And verses can be one
sentence,
1 or 2 sentences.
Okay.
Maybe 3.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. The shortest one of that was Jesus wept.
Yes.
So literally 2 words.
Yes.
In English, at least.
We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the actual content.
I guess a little bit of a Bible geography 101.
Right.
Or
refresher.
Bible typography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. English
stuff. Warm bosoms. We're kicking off reading from First Kings in this episode. New book unlocked.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's been a
while. Yeah.
In the last episode, you said that you hoped that there would be more of a like Succession style story to Solomon becoming king, because Solomon skipped some rungs.
He did.
He was actually 10th down in the line of succession, and suddenly in Chronicles, God just says that he's going to be king.
He was 10th down, and only one of them that we know of had actually died. Right? Or is he 10th after?
Two had definitely died. The first one was Amnon.
That's right. Because Absalom killed him.
And
then Absalom
and then Absalom had the revolution that he tried to overthrow David. And then Joab, I think, killed Absalom. And then
his head got stuck in a tree.
Yeah. But Joab, I think, made sure to kill him. Yeah.
So he's 10th in line, but really 8.
Yeah. And then there's this other thing where the second of David's sons is mentioned in a genealogy, but is never brought up again. So people assume that he died young, but they don't say it. And also his name in the book of Samuel is different than the book of Kings.
Right.
So,
and by 10th in line, in
the book of Chronicles,
that is men only.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think they only mention one daughter of David's.
The one with the...
Right. The one with Amnon.
Yeah. Okay.
Because as we've already seen, the chronicler likes to cut out anything that looks bad on David or even Solomon, it seems like. So that's likely why we didn't get any of this in the Book of Chronicles.
Gotcha.
And I know I've said it a million times. The Book of Chronicles came 300 years after they compiled together the Book of Samuel, and 700 years after the events actually took place.
Right.
So it was already ancient history for the chronicler, just for a little bit of context. Okay. King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. So his servants said to him, "Let a young virgin be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be his attendant. Let her lie in your bosom, so that my lord the king may be warm." So they searched for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel and found Abishag, the Shunammite, and brought her for the king. The young woman was very beautiful. She became the king's attendant and served him, but the king did not know her sexually.
Sure. Well, he probably just couldn't get it up.
You sound dubious. Yes.
So,
you think the Bible is lying about that?
Okay, hold on. Is Solomon already king at the beginning of this story?
No.
Okay. So we know that he ruled 40 years.
Yes, and that's a good point. So we know he ruled we brought this up in the last episode, and I feel embarrassed. When I was editing it, I felt embarrassed because I should have known how old David was because they said it before. So he was 30 years old when he started to reign. He reigned for 40 years.
Okay.
So therefore he's about 70.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
I think in the last episode I guessed about 60, but actually we know from this that even though these are very rounded numbers, it's very likely not really.
And honestly, the difference between 60 and 70 back then might not have been that great, because right in these days, if somebody's 60 and they're not that old, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. I would never consider a 60-year-old on the precipice of death.
Right. Whereas, I feel like in Cocoon, the movie Cocoon,
right?
Which took place in the 80s.
Yes.
Everybody was all the grandparents were in their 60s.
Yeah. Right.
Except that was the grandparent age.
Except the actors themselves were actually in their late 40s.
I think that was just the main guy.
Wilford Brimley.
Who just always looked old. Yeah. Yeah, so David was only about 70 years old.
Okay, so that makes sense in my head. Even though back then, who knows? 60s, you could have been, I don't know. When some parts of the Bible, they live to like 200.
I know.
In other parts of the Bible, it's like, is 40 the normal age that people die?
At this point, they're not really lying about ages as far as like they live to 150 years old or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So he's sick and he can't get warm.
Apparently. Yeah. For some reason, he can't generate body heat.
I will say
that's a thing.
As you get older, I feel like people do have a heart because their circulatory system slows down.
Sure. Yeah.
So they are colder. Having worked in a restaurant, I worked in a restaurant when I was in high school. Shout out to the Damn Side Inn in Pellston, Michigan. That was pretty old and did not have air conditioning. And so in the summer, we would open the windows because you would get like a fabulous cross breeze coming in and it would kind of cool things down. Except when the old people came in and sat next to the window and they'd be like, "Oh, Burr, I'm so cold. Can you shut the window?" And we're like sweating into their food.
Which is what they wanted.
And we're like, I guess so. I guess we'll die for you to eat dinner here tonight.
Lindsay actually cut herself earlier making dinner for us tonight. And I was like, well, thank you for bleeding for my food. She's very good at like self-sacrificing for others' ability to eat. Yeah.
Yep, I'm a giver. Anyway, so that makes sense. But I don't know how having a virgin wait on him is gonna.
So why does she need to be a virgin? Right. And why couldn't one of his wives or concubines handle this for him?
Right.
Again, this is not in Chronicles and reads more like somebody who can't deny certain elements of what happened because they were this was probably actually written around the time that he did the stuff actually happened, right? It's a good indication that it was.
Gotcha.
Because like otherwise they would just deny it, you know?
Right.
Like the chronicler does.
I mean, but is it shameful? Would it be shameful for him to need a virgin back then, even if it was 300, 400 years?
Yeah.
I feel like virgins are still a thing that are important.
You know?
Yeah.
So
religion.
She comes up and it'll be more in the next episode. She will come up again, and it has to do with, apparently, my understanding is it has to do with like how the succession plays out.
Gotcha.
Kind of. So yeah. And whether or not she ended up having sex with him, I guess plays into that too.
Right.
Because kind of thinking back to Absalom.
Well, yeah, you can't.
With the
okay, so I see where you're going with this. Let's not spoil.
Yeah.
Let's not spoil the Bible.
Right.
But okay. So I guess that's why whatever is incoming, that's why they have to say he didn't know her
sexually.
Right. But like, what does that mean?
Know her sexually.
Does it just mean penis and vagina?
I think so. It's knowing what her vagina feels
like. Is she like, I know you can't hear the sound of me making like the blowjob motion.
I mean, you could just make a blowjob sound. Like, it's
How
not
do you
like
make a blowjob sound?
Well, there's one way.
That would be so fucked up. That would be so fucked up.
Yeah. I'm not saying let's do it. I'm just saying
that would be
I know of one way.
That would be so fucked up.
In case anybody's listening to this and has like never heard the show before, we're married. So
yeah, the idea
Lynn's not like a coworker or anything.
No, the fucked up part of it would be doing it on microphone for you all to hear.
Yeah.
And then Josh sitting through the edit and still deciding this is a good idea and leaving it in the podcast.
I'm on the fence about it.
Seems a little much for us to share with our audience.
Do they really need this 2 minutes?
It would take longer than that. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yeah. When it's a blowjob, not really good. You want a blowjob to be done as fast as possible. You don't want somebody to like really have good stamina for a blowjob.
No.
For getting a blowjob.
Yeah.
Whatever the fuck that was. Now, Adonijah, son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, "I will be king." He prepared for himself chariots and horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. His father had never at any time reprimanded him by asking, "Why have you done thus and so?" He was also a very handsome man, and he was born next after Absalom. He conferred with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and the priest Abiathar, and they supported Adonijah. But the priest Zadok and Benaniah and the prophet Nathan and Shammah and his companions, David's own warriors, did not side with Adonijah. Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fatted cattle, and he invited all his brothers and the king's sons and all the royal officials of Judah. But he did not invite the prophet Nathan or Benaiah or the warriors or his brother Solomon. Da, da, da. He's trying to shore up support.
And he just assumes, as you would, I think, knowing how normally these things work.
Right.
That the next in line would be the king.
Yeah. Oh, David's health isn't doing well.
Oh, yeah.
I should get ready to become king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start.
Nobody said otherwise.
Myself.
Yeah. Nobody's told me otherwise. Right. So.
And his dad's like, yeah, all right.
And his dad's not correcting him. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing to include.
It is.
Yeah.
He just goes to bed at night with his new friend, who he doesn't have sexual relations with.
A bish hag.
Yeah. And is like, now, of course, because she's nestled in his bosom, creates a sense of like confidence, right? Like he can tell her things.
Right.
And she knows she can't tell because he'll kill her.
Well, yeah.
Well, that, that helps.
Right.
But so like she's laying on his chest, which is funny that her laying on his chest instead of him laying on her bosom.
Right.
I would imagine her bosom is a lot more comfortable than his. But anyway, he's probably just like, this fucking kid of mine. I don't want to tell him it's not going to be him. I should though, right? And she's like, no. This will be funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's just see what happens.
I don't know if she ends up like having any sort of, I can't imagine the writers of the Bible ended up giving her any sort of like power over David,
No, but
Yeah.
Women don't have power.
Yeah.
But
and it's David.
Sometimes you can whisper in a dude's ear.
Yeah.
He thinks he came up with the idea himself.
And she's like the new Bathsheba, where it's like, the hot young thing.
Yeah,
that he's
of course.
Into, so,
right.
Yeah.
Who he's not having sex with, so.
Quote unquote.
Right. Yeah. Or one of his wives. Probably, I don't know. I don't know how politics work within a wifedom.
Yeah.
When
with the sister wives.
When you have, and how is his mother the new one that we've never heard of before? Yeah,
his mom. Haggith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is she in David's ear, don't tell him it's not going to be him. Just let him have this. It'll be fine. It'll be good for him.
Yeah, we don't hear anything from Haggith herself, but we are going to be hearing from Bathsheba pretty soon.
Right, because that's Solomon's mom, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Just like I said, Solomon was 10th in line. So Adonijah is right next after Absalom. I guess we don't really need to cover any of this. I had the whole list of all the names and everything. But
do any of them come up?
Not really. The only thing that I think is interesting is that there's Nathan,
right?
Which is the one right before Solomon.
Okay.
Who does not come up when we go through this, which is interesting. But do you remember when we were covering the Gospels? There's 2 genealogies of Joseph.
Okay.
One was in the book of Matthew and one was in the book of Luke, and they were different.
Yes.
Yep. And this is where they branch off.
Okay.
One had Joseph coming from Solomon, being a descendant of Solomon.
Oh.
The other one had him being a descendant from Nathan.
Gotcha.
Solomon's brother.
I see.
So that's the only kind of thing that I think is a little interesting about this is that we don't hear anything about Nathan in this that I've seen so far, but Nathan is number 9 and
gotcha.
Solomon would have been 10. So that being said, as we go forward, we're going to be hearing a lot from a Nathan, but that's going to be the prophet Nathan, who is not the same person.
Right.
Then Nathan said to Bathsheba, "Have you not heard that Adonijah has become king and David does not know it? Now, therefore, come. Let me give you advice so that you may save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go in at once to King David and say to him, 'Did you not swear to your servant, saying, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king? Why then is Adonijah king? Then, while you are still speaking with the king, I will come in after you and confirm your words.' So Bathsheba went to the king. The king was very old. Abishag the Shunammite was attending the king. The king said, 'What do you wish?' She said to him, 'My lord, you swore to your servant by the Lord your God, saying, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit on my throne. But now suddenly Adonijah has become king, though you do not know it. He has sacrificed oxen, fatted cattle, and sheep in abundance, and has invited all the children of the king, the priest Abiathar, and Joab, the commander of the army. But your servant Solomon he has not invited. But the eyes of all Israel are on you to tell them who shall sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise it will come to pass, when my lord the king sleeps with his ancestors, that my son Solomon and I will be counted offenders.' While she was still speaking with the king, the prophet Nathan came in. The king was told, 'Here is the prophet Nathan.' Nathan said, 'My lord the king, have you said, Adonijah shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit on my throne? For today he has sacrificed oxen, fatted cattle, and sheep, and has invited all the king's children, Joab, the commander of the army, and the priest Abiathar, who are now eating and drinking before him, and saying, Long live King Adonijah. But he did not invite me, and the priest Zadok, and Benaiah, and your servant Solomon. Has this thing been brought about by my lord the king? And have you not let your servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him?' It's interesting to me, too, how they're setting up like sides in all this with allies and stuff within the royal court. You know?
Makes sense.
Yeah, but it's like calling out who those sides are so you know who they are.
So you know who was on the right side of history?
Kinda. Yeah, like that's the whole point of it, right?
When they die later, when they're killed later, you don't feel bad for the people who are on the wrong side of history.
Right, because what's important to remember as you're reading all this is written by the winners.
Right.
This is written by Solomon and his people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, of course.
So you're getting a slanted view of all this. But.
Yeah. So it's the interesting thing to me about this part of the story is that when you start reading about what the fuck is the kid's name?
Adonijah.
Yeah. I'm never going to remember that.
That's fine.
When you
probably won't need to know it after this.
Well, I mean,
episode.
I'm not going to remember it when I need to say it again in 30 seconds.
Right.
When you started this story out, it made it seem like he was under the assumption that because he was the next in line, that it would be him. But the fact that he has not invited Solomon to all of his festivities really makes you understand that, like, no, he knows that it was supposed to be like that his dad said, no, it's Solomon.
Maybe. We don't know why. But like, here's the reason why I say that is because I wonder if it's more like Solomon is just his favorite and he's kind of worried that that's going to be the thing. Like he may know that he's up for it against Solomon.
Then he's not very smart because why would you, if Solomon is his favorite, why would you exclude him? Because then all that does is turn an eye to
because he probably doesn't want Solomon to know about this, and so that he can. So this is probably him trying to.
He's throwing a party and sacrificing animals, and he doesn't think Solomon's going to find out that he's doing this.
I mean, he probably just wants to shore up support, and he knows he's not going to get it from Solomon.
I guess what I'm saying is like politically and from like a strategic thing that you would want to invite Solomon, so that way it didn't look like you were like plotting against him.
Right.
Because if he is dad's favorite, the last thing you want before your dad actually dies and makes you king is like piss him off because you're being mean to his favorite kid.
Yeah. I don't know if that would piss off David, really. Like, when you think about it, like, would David really care?
I don't think he would really
like,
care.
He's not that. But he's not that. He hasn't, like, told him to stop running around with those 50 horsemen who are preceding him or stuff, whatever he's doing.
But it might not piss David off. But I have a feeling that David does listen to his wives more than they let on in this story. And to me, Bathsheba seems to have like the most boldness in all of his wives. And that's primarily based on the Bible only really talking about her most of the time.
Yeah, you don't hear about any of the other wives.
Which isn't even much.
She's saying here that, did you not swear to your servant saying your son Solomon shall succeed me as king?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But we never got that conversation previously to this. But
that also is what made me think that Adonijah.
Yeah, you got
it. Knew already.
Right. Or she's lying. Like this, that's what I see is likely going on here. Like what I think really happened probably based on this is that Adonijah thought he was going to be king because he was next in line of the ones left alive. And, he probably knew that there was a chance that Solomon was going to try for it. Maybe like there's a lot of stuff I think we're not hearing.
I know.
That
it's really hard to figure out what happened in the Bible when they don't give you the full story.
Right. And I get the feeling like he knew Solomon was vying for it too, probably. So he was trying to like get his own resources shored up here. And then Solomon ends up becoming victorious over this whole thing. So then we get this story of, well, he said he was going to give it to him, even though David maybe never did. Maybe David was planning on Adonijah taking over. And then Solomon was just the one who did.
Well, except that God told him.
Right.
Yeah. That it was Solomon.
Yeah. Anyway, as we move on, apparently some time has passed. We don't really know how much time, if it's the next day, I would imagine it would have been like maybe a half hour later, but we don't really know. King David answered, "Summon Bathsheba to me." So she came into the king's presence and stood before the king. The king swore, saying, "As the Lord lives, who saved my life from every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. So will I do this day." Then Bathsheba bowed with her face to the ground and did obeisance to the king and said, "May my lord King David live forever." King David said, "Summon to me the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah." Then they came before the king, and the king said to them, "Take with you the servants of your lord, and have my son Solomon ride on my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. There let the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anoint him king over Israel. Then blow the trumpet and say, 'Long live King Solomon!' You shall go up following him. Let him enter and sit on my throne. He shall be king in my place, for I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah." Benaiah answered the king, "Amen. May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so ordain. As the Lord has been with the Lord my king, so may he be with Solomon, and make his throne greater than the throne of my lord King David. May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so ordain.
Oh my gosh.
As the Lord has been with my lord the king."
Like maybe it was more common back then, but like nowadays, if somebody started speaking to me like that, I'd be like, come on, fucking spit it out. What are you trying to say? Jesus Christ.
It's not even a stutter. It's just repetitious.
Like, how many words do you have to use in a sentence? Is there a minimum?
Yeah. The one thing to keep in mind with that is when they say the Lord, referring to God in the Old Testament, that's likely Yahweh. And they translate it to the Lord out of respect.
Right.
So
okay. So in the English
he's probably
version,
saying Yahweh.
Yeah, it makes a lot less sense than in like the original.
May Yahweh, the God of my Lord the King, so ordain, as Yahweh has been with my Lord the King. It would just
it sounds
it sounds better.
Yeah.
You know, but
fucking Christians.
I know.
Fucking shit up.
Yeah. So anyway, David is basically just
like, let's make him king now.
Yeah, we're going to make it official.
Instead of waiting till I die, which is what the plan originally was.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to control what happens then. Let's just do it now. Let's just get it over with. I'm fine with this virgin laying on my bosom. Like, this is going to be how I want to spend the rest of my time. Let's just do this. And then I can mentor him a tiny little bit before I die and help build this stupid house that we're supposed to build.
House for God.
House for God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, yeah, it will remove any question, like, or any civil war. Hopefully that would happen after he passed.
Right.
And both brothers were like, me.
Yeah.
It's me.
It's me.
It's me, not you. The idea is that Solomon's going to ride on his dad's mule up to the throne room and go sit on the throne. And then those three guys are going to be like, long live the king.
Yeah. And therefore he is.
And now he's king.
Yeah. And I do, like, we don't get a ton of drama. I'll just spare you now. We don't get a ton of drama by the end of this episode because we've only got one reading left. But next week, I think we're going to see a little bit more shake up over it. But this is Adonijah's response. Adonijah and all the guests who were with him heard it as they finished feasting. When Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, he said, "Why is the city in an uproar?" While he was still speaking, Jonathan, son of the priest Abiathar, arrived. Adonijah said, "Come in, for you are a worthy man, and surely you bring good news." Jonathan answered Adonijah, "No, for our lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent him with the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, Benaiah, and they had him ride on the king's mule. The priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan have anointed him king at Gihon, and they have gone up from there rejoicing. So the city is in an uproar. This is the noise that you heard. Solomon now sits on the royal throne." Then all the guests of Adonijah got up trembling and went their own ways. Adonijah, fearing Solomon, got up and went to grasp the horns of the altar. Solomon was informed, "Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon. See, he has laid hold of the horns of the altar, saying, 'Let King Solomon swear to me first that he will not kill his servant with the sword.' So Solomon responded, 'If he proves to be a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the ground. But if wickedness is found in him, he shall die.' Then King Solomon sent to have him brought down from the altar. He came to do obeisance to King Solomon. Solomon said to him, 'Go home.'" Sounds like it's resolving peacefully.
Yeah, and that's what you would have wanted in a king, is someone who just flipped real quickly.
Yeah. Adonijah, you mean?
Yeah.
Like just immediately showed his belly type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and again, I wonder what really happened.
Right.
Yeah, because that does definitely sound like something the victor would have said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. True. Yeah. Because it was very quick. No, like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
No going to talk to dad.
Yeah. No confirming any of it.
No confirming. Just being like, "Oh, don't kill me."
Yeah. And everybody just slowly walking away.
Yes.
Like, "Oh, look at the time."
Yeah.
We got to go watch, I don't know, Israel Idol?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Yeah. 2 episodes ago, when we were covering that big perfection in the Bible, we talked about a couple pastors giving their takes on stuff, and I thought I would do that again. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this. Listeners should let us know if they want to hear more of like the Christian take on some of this stuff, or if you want us to just talk about it ourselves.
And how can they let you know that, Josh?
I don't know, like ESP or like skywriting.
Oh,
I
do like skywriting.
We are in the general vicinity of Michigan, so just get a few planes
over all of Michigan.
Yeah. Space writing.
Ooh.
Or you could email us on our website. We're going to look at a couple of pastors that we talked about before. It was just kind of interesting takes that they had on this stuff. I was like, how the fuck do you get any sort of meaning out of this?
Right.
So Daniel Badarase, I am sorry if I'm butchering your name. I guess. I don't know. As sorry as I am for anybody whose names I screw up. I don't care if I screw up people who have been dead for thousands of years. I don't care if I screw up their names, but if somebody's alive. Anyway, this guy's from Maranatha Bible Church in Chicago.
But, okay, look at the description that we're given of her. Therefore, his servant said to him, let a young woman be sought for my Lord. Then look at verse 3. So they sought for a beautiful young woman. And look at verse 4. The young woman was very beautiful. Like, why is that important if she was beautiful or not? Put anybody with a pulse in the bed and let him hold on to them. So again, this seems a little bit suspicious, and rightfully so. It is suspicious. And it's a reminder that as long as you live, sin will pursue you in one way or another. Until the very moment that you give your final breath, there is an ever-present enemy that will seek to capture you and to make you a slave, or to make you stumble, to taint your testimony all the days of your life. And it is a relentless foe. Sin doesn't care about your financial condition, your societal standing, your physical health. It doesn't care. It seeks to devour you. It seeks to make you a slave. It seeks you until you enter into glory. So let it be a reminder that as you and I want to protect this flame in our hearts, as we desire to honor God all the days of our lives, sin is right there every moment, every season. Whether you're 17 or you're 70, there is a war, an ongoing war, and we will not know eternal rest until we enter into eternity.
So what was interesting to me about this interpretation of the story is that, what about that is sin?
About wanting it to be a beautiful virgin? That's lust, right? I guess.
Is it?
He's
not knowing her sexually. We don't know that.
Still lust after something without.
You can. I'm just saying.
Sexually.
I'm just saying we don't know that that's what's going on.
Well, no.
Based on the text given,
right?
It's interesting that this person, that Daniel here, and a lot of other Christians out there, would kind of like cast a judgment on this,
right?
Where
that
it's like
sinful.
That it's sinful, even though they're explicitly saying, if you think that the Bible is accurate, if you think that the Bible is telling you the truth about what happened, then there's no real sin. And I think that was constructed that way, obviously. But
right,
you got a hot take on this.
I do have a hot take. This is going to be mental gymnastics a little bit.
No.
Okay, so he's saying that because she's young and beautiful, that creates temptation, which is the sin.
It
right?
could be.
Yeah. He's not the one that said, go get me a virgin. They decided
the attendants did.
The best thing for him would be to go get a virgin who was beautiful. So that was the decision they made.
Right.
But is this guy saying that is like somebody coming to you with something sinful to tempt you in hopes to, like, I don't know, fucking knock you off your, like, is there a sinister motivation to these attendants making sure it's a beautiful virgin as opposed to, like, you know, one of the ladies you already got in your stable?
It's an interesting idea of what, I don't know if this is what you were going after or not, but it's interesting though, like, if she is a virgin, then, you know, there's kind of a seal that you can prove has not been broken.
I mean, that's
by the king.
Bullshit.
You know, I agree. I agree that, like,
well, and a lot of women have been killed throughout the years because of that idea. Yeah.
I'm not saying these are enlightened
fucking
people.
Ridden a horse,
right?
Anyway,
I'm not saying these are enlightened people.
Right.
She would not have been allowed to ride a horse.
Well, that's why women had to sit side saddle for a really long time.
Is that true? Is that? Oh, that probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to, like, possibly lose your virginity to a horse. Because as we all know, virginity for women is just the hymen.
Some women don't even have, like, hymens like that. Or, you know, they did sports or something. I don't know.
I don't think women did sports.
No. Or she could have gotten fucking raped or something. You just never know.
Yeah, there's something.
And then she kept it a secret. So I mean, yes, I guess in some archaic way you could then say, like, no, he hasn't sinned. Checker. Yeah. Yeah. But is this other dude also saying, like, it doesn't matter whether he fucks her or not because lusting after her is still a sin?
Yeah. But again, the Bible's not saying that he lusted.
No,
you know?
Absolutely not. So it is. Why bring it up at all? Why even talk about it? They need to explain why they even mentioned that she's beautiful and a virgin?
No, they need to explain why this applies to your life.
Oh.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this is I kind of touched on this previously, but it just keeps sinking into me about, like, nothing about this writing even indicates within itself that it is meant to give you any sort of enlightenment about your life.
No, it feels like a history book.
It documents history, and it doesn't do that very well. But that's what its intention is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and it's not until much later that people came along and said, no, all scripture is supposed to enlighten you on your life and be about personal development. And so you have to twist this shit around to come up with ways that it can mean something for you in your life, you know?
So I'm sorry, I missed what is he saying the meaning of this is?
That sin finds ways in at any point in your life. I kind of think is what he's going for.
I see.
And also, you know, even though I have no idea if this Daniel Badarase, if he believes that the Bible is perfect or anything like that. I don't know what his theology is, but
but also, like, the man has a ton of wives and concubines.
Yeah.
And we're worried about this one lady being sin?
Right. Yeah.
Why wouldn't she just be another person in his fucking cavalcade of vagina?
Right. I got another clip here and I don't remember what it is. So let's play that and see what else he says.
These servants came with a suggestion, and it was under the guise of health. Sin and temptation has a very creative way of approaching us and introducing itself to us. And it's one of its favorite cloaks is to pretend to be a means for good, to pretend to be something that will benefit you or to achieve a better end, though the means might be questionable and arguable. So there's a call for discernment to understand that I have to be on guard at all times. I have to understand that there are even people who might have good intentions for me and might present ideas to me that ultimately drift me further away from the will of God. Abishag didn't help, really. She might have physically, but again, this is just pushing David further away from what he should have honored from the beginning, and that's to be a king with one wife, one woman.
Whoa.
Yeah. They're
really pressing their current modern ideals on something that happened thousands of fucking years ago.
Yeah.
Nowhere in, and I can't believe I'm, like, fighting for the idea of having multiple wives. But listen, like, it was I hate this phrase, but like it was the times. There's no way there was anywhere in the Bible that said one man, one woman, one marriage.
Right. Well, no, Lindsay, you're quite wrong.
Not in this part of the Bible.
You see, in Genesis 2:24, it says, therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, or cleaves to his wife, as it's also said often, and they shall become one flesh. And that's the verse that keeps getting used over and over again to say that it's supposed to be one man, one woman. Is that verse. And that verse does not say it's supposed to be one man and one woman. It just is talking about a marriage.
It also describes a horrific idea of becoming like one amorphous, fleshy being.
Yeah. I would not say me and Lindsay are one flesh.
Oh God, no.
Obviously, that I think is meant to talk about sex.
Right.
But But that's the thing is, like, you're right. There have been no commands whatsoever up to now in the Bible that is where God has told anyone to only have one wife.
Yeah. Like, so did he do this sermon every time they brought up a new wife or a new concubine?
Right.
Because David's committed a lot of sin.
Yeah.
Then if the idea is that he was supposed to have one wife.
Yeah. And Solomon, the son coming after, who God is ordaining as the one that
everybody
will
fucking
succeed,
loves Solomon.
He's coming from not only another wife, he's coming from he had the dad he had the former husband killed.
Well, she was still married to her husband.
Yeah,
got her pregnant.
Right.
Yeah,
while she was still married.
That whole thing was very salacious.
Yeah,
but yet it's this. And I don't know, maybe he's done this sermon a couple times and had similar things to say about that situation.
Right.
But it is, I don't have a problem with like people who decide they want to live in a relationship where there's multiple significant others, right? As long as it's agreed upon.
Oh, yeah.
By both sides. And like, it's not like a situation where like only the men can marry multiple women and like they're 12 when they get,
As long as everybody's consensual and happy, who gives a shit?
So like, whatever. I don't think that was that situation for David, but it is crazy that this would be, to me, be the sermon. Like this is
the point of it.
This is what he's choosing to like pull out of this.
Right.
Is talk about this beautiful virgin as temptation for David, and sin comes out of nowhere. Even people trying to make decisions, trying to be helpful, still providing you with temptation and leading David down a path of sin. This is like the end of the line. Like he's done this hundreds of times.
Yeah.
Probably.
Right.
It's so stupid and very like definitely something modern.
Yeah. Imposing modern, like you said, imposing modern morals.
And I would say probably, and my use of the term modern is like the whole one woman, one man marriage thing has been around for a couple hundred years. But
sure, yeah. But nonetheless, it was not there's no, like I said, no indication that God had any issue with it ahead of this.
I would say he would have brought it up probably.
Yeah.
He's usually pretty good about telling David when he's mad at him about something.
I mean, it rarely happens with David.
Well, when he counted.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
Yes.
He got real mad about that.
That's a good example. Yeah. So God could have, I mean, that's what God did when he fucking held a census that he told him to hold.
Yeah.
And yet David gets married to all these women up till now. But,
Again, if I were God, we don't know that I'm not. If I were God back then and the king was under my thumb, essentially, I would want him to have as many children as possible because that spreads my influence.
Right.
Because then they have a bunch of children and then we get to Jesus eventually, according to the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So if God plans everything ahead of time, if David wouldn't have had a bunch of children with a bunch of different women, and if Joseph wasn't from the fucking line of one of those,
that's a really good point.
One of those children, I don't know. Would we ever get to Jesus?
No, that's a good point, because I'm pretty sure Nathan, as well as Solomon, we know for sure, but I think Nathan too they were both born of second wives,
right?
Not the first wife of David.
Oh, she would have been way too old at that point, right? Like she had maybe
Abigail,
the
I think, was
first
the first
2 kids probably, and then was just like, nah, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, well, after Amnon.
Yeah. So definitely probably not his first or second wife, and we know the Solomon was definitely like his 3rd or 4th wife, 5th. I don't know how many wives he
Bathsheba.
was in at that point. So.
Yeah.
It
really.
I feel like if you're arguing against this as a Christian, you're not. It's just not good.
Yeah.
It's not a good
you're
argument.
kind of saying God was wrong.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Why wouldn't have God punished the line then?
Yeah.
If it was sin, if it was sinful, if God didn't want this to happen, why would a descendant of one of these lines of one of his illegitimate marriages be the stepdad to God's kid?
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. So his take on this, Adonijah should have seen what happened to Absalom and learned from it, and he didn't. Right. And they do draw a lot of similarities between the two. The 50 horses running ahead of him, it was something Absalom did. It was that he's handsome like Absalom, all that stuff. Of course, he's talking about a moral downfall, and nothing about the text gives any indication that morals play into this at all.
Right.
It's all about who ultimately lands on the throne, and that, quote, God wanted them to be king, unquote. Adonijah is next in line. It makes sense that he would think he was going to be king. There is no context given for why he shouldn't be king. I don't see any reason to think he has a moral failing here.
Right.
Adonijah is not being immoral by thinking he's going to be next in line from what information we're given.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, adding morality to any of these stories is ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, you obviously can look at it and be like, well, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. As an atheist, I can read any story, and be like, well, I wouldn't do that.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the Bible.
Yeah.
But we also don't need to apply morality to every fucking situation. Or we don't need somebody to explain to us morality. You know what I mean? It really feels like this guy. I mean, whatever. His flock but probably love him.
Oh, the pastor.
Yeah. Like, did you run out of things to talk about?
Right. Yeah.
Are you going through the Bible and you didn't have anything to say about this chapter, so you feel like you had to make something up?
Well, that's why I looked up stuff, because I was reading through it and I'm like, what the fuck? You think about it sometimes when I'm reading through this, I'll think about it as a Christian reading through it, trying to read through the Bible and stuff like that. And it's okay, so you're getting through all this stuff where it's just talking about the amounts of gold that are going into the temple and all the names of people and everything. And how the fuck are you supposed to pull any sort of meaning out of it?
Yeah.
And so then I look up stuff like this and I'm like, wow, they just really have to pull something out of their ass to create meaning.
When he was, I was just when he first started talking in that second clip, I was just how exhausting to be a Christian.
Yeah.
If you always have to be on the watch out for sin, always on the lookout for the enemy. And I'm oh my God, that sounds exhausting.
Oh yeah. I mean, imagine being a kid growing up in that and being told that,
Right.
That's the thing why so many kids that are growing up in that, when they hit college years, if they end up hitting the right environment where they are able to break out of it, they go way too hard the other direction with it,
Yeah.
Because you put so much pressure on yourself.
Right.
I've been seeing that a lot when I watch videos on Mormonism. They start trying to be an adult Mormon themselves, and then they start getting so much pressure that they just fold from it,
Right.
We also had clips from Skip in the last episode. Skip Heitzig from Calvary Church in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So Skip's video is about this chapter, but he starts off talking about everything leading up to now in the Bible.
Let me remind you how it all began with Israel. Israel had been governed by God. it was a theocratic kingdom. God spoke his law through Moses to the people. But as time went on, the tribes began to fragment, get restless, and they came to God's representative Samuel and they said, "Make us a king that we can be like the other nations." Now, I feel that was a mistake because Israel's strength lay in the fact that it was unlike all the other nations. It was singular. It was a theocracy. God gave a law. His law was to rule and reign. God would speak through the priesthood, through the prophets. But the people wanted a political leader. And I feel that the more politicians you get involved in any society, the more problems you have. I see it as a general axiomatic rule of life. When a nation goes awry, the government grows bigger and bigger. Well, they wanted a big government. And Samuel said, listen, I'll tell you, you say you want a king, but the king is going to tax you. The king is going to use your sons and daughters as slaves, servants for his household, his agenda. They said, I don't care, make us a king. So they found a king. His name was Saul. You know Saul's story. We covered Saul's story. After Saul, David, a man after God's own heart, was on the throne. And it was something that God chose, and that began the dynasty of King David through his son Solomon.
So this is about how big governments are bad.
No, skip.
Yeah.
Skip. I'm so glad you have an opinion about what they should have done thousands of years ago. I'm sure God's super happy about your opinion about what he did thousands of years ago.
Right. It definitely is that, that God is telling us not to have big governments and not like, I don't know, the kings having books written saying that everybody wanted kings,
I don't understand. I don't understand his point because the Judges, Book of Judges, or whatever the fuck that book, the Judges.
The Book of Judges.
That happened before this, right?
Yep. That was after Joshua.
What the fuck is the difference between a judge and a king?
Yeah, so Judges, like, that was him talking about the time when they were, like, ruled over as a theocracy with prophets and stuff like that. It was a bad time, like they had, I guess the whole thing of Judges, if you remember, was that it was cyclical, right?
Yeah,
like,
they would get a judge, the judge would die, they would fall into fucking crisis, and then God would be like, here's a new fucking judge.
Yeah, and then that would get them out of crisis and everything, and then they would fall away again.
Right.
That was the whole cycle.
Yeah, so what the fuck is the difference between a judge and a king?
Yeah, I mean, the judge isn't. The judge is ruling. The judge wasn't even like ruling, really.
I mean,
like, at most they were like tribal leaders. They weren't really like.
Right.
There is a tough thing to really say because they were like fucking Solomon was a mythical figure. Like these weren't real people.
Right.
That's the tough part about it is like trying to like put a title to what they were, what their role was. Doesn't make sense.
It's funny to me that like he was like they wanted big government by having a king.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually that is a smaller government than what they had because what they had before
God is infinitely big.
Well, no, because they had a bunch of local people leading.
Oh, yeah.
And they had like a tribal council or something.
Probably. Yeah. Right? They would have had some sort of
How is that smaller than a guy?
Right. Yeah.
It's not.
I know. It is actually a small government type of thing. Like having a king, dictatorship is small government.
Right.
And that's why you kind of don't want small government because then you have less control.
Yeah. Skip just wants
the people have less control.
Right. Skip clearly just wants
his government to be small. Theocratic. Yeah.
Rule.
Yeah.
Which again isn't small government because like there's a Skip and then there's a David and then there's the fuckers that live around here.
Yeah.
And like all doing their own thing.
Well, the biggest problem with it is who gets to say what God says.
Right.
Right. Like because even here we've seen where Skip disagrees with Daniel, the other pastor.
Right. Oh, Daniel.
Disagreed with Daniel. Yeah. Disagrees with the other pastor that we heard from a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Like pastors disagree on this stuff.
And they all aren't.
Yeah. So it's really not even like who God put in control. Right. It's whoever is in control gets to say, God says what I'm doing is right. Yep. As I'm preaching to the choir. Anyway, here's another skip clip.
But the overarching lesson of the book of 1 Kings is that any society that pushes God out of national life is doomed. That's why this book is so germane and so applicable and so up to date for this generation right now. Any nation that once swore an allegiance in God we trust and pushes God away, pushes God out, is guaranteed looking at their own demise and doom. I get worried when I look at our country through the lens of Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, Paul said they didn't want to retain God in their thinking. And so God gave them over to uncleanness. A couple verses later, God gave them over to vile passions. A couple verses later, God gave them over to a debased mind, a reprobate mind, to do those things that are unnatural, unseemly. Now you look at what's going on, the national language and talking points of our country. It's Romans chapter 1. We've pushed God away. We've said we don't want to keep God in our thinking, and we should be able to identify as whatever gender we are and marry anybody we want to and say we're whoever we say we are. God says, really, if you want that, I'll give you over to it. And that's the first sign that a nation is under judgment, when God consigns them gives them what they say they want. You know, the restraining power of God is one of the best graces he's ever done, when he removes that and gives people what they say they passionately want, and their thinking is confused. It's a sign that they're looking at doomsday.
Doomsday.
What the fuck?
That's right.
I don't know if we can listen to this guy anymore.
We've got 2 more skip clips.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Taxes, big government, gender identity. These are the things that the Book of Kings is actually about, according to Skip. He knows how to really twist the Bible to his own politics, doesn't he? You know?
Yeah, I feel like that should make him not a nonprofit.
Well, yeah, he should be charging for this.
Yes.
The IRS should be charging for this. So he's not interested in finding the truth to this stuff, because he's just finding excuses for judging other people, right? This is just about finding excuses to blame other people for your problems. You know why we have so many problems in the country? It's because of gender identity.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good, Skip.
Yeah. If someone in Skip's church asks him why God hasn't given them a job, Skip would probably say because of gay marriage. You know, it's just about figuring out how to blame other people. Skip is saying that disobeying God dooms a nation is the lesson of this story. What Skip doesn't tell people is that Samuel and Kings was first compiled together around 625 BCE, after the northern kingdom of Israel had already fallen. Then the kingdom of Judah falls to the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and after that, the book is updated to address the fall. If you were an Israelite in 586 to 538 BCE for about 50 years, the promises that Yahweh had made that there would be a king from the line of David on the throne forever, all of that was blown. The idea that the land had been promised to them by Yahweh was blown. So why would you believe in Yahweh at that point, right? And the reason that the priests came up with was one that many generations had already used whenever promises and predictions didn't work. Israel stopped obeying Yahweh. They lacked faith and they turned from God. And so God wreaked vengeance on them, right? This kind of thinking started to shift I just started learning about this, and it's kind of fascinating. The thinking started to shift right before Jesus was born, when the Romans took over Israel. All of a sudden, instead of them saying like, oh, we're being oppressed because we turned away from God, they started saying we're being oppressed because we turned to God. We're being oppressed because we believe in the true God, you know? And that persecution fetish started kicking in, and it spread around the world. Like, I'm saying this as if Jewish people came up with this first, and I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they just were one of many cultures that picked this up, but then the Christians picked it up and really ran with it, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my whole thing about this. He's not actually giving them useful information about this stuff. No. You know,
I'm just picturing a ton of people sitting in his congregation too, just sitting there listening and like shaking their head. Yes.
Yeah.
And like that whole thing. And listen, you know, anybody who listens to this podcast knows Josh and I's political beliefs.
Yeah.
We try not to talk about it too often, but listen, we will, because we're fucking people and it's important to us. I'm just like, I can't. I have such a hard time listening to that sort of stuff. So if I get real quiet, it's because I'm just seething full of rage.
That's fine.
Because Josh is going to make me listen to 2 more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like I have to address this.
That's fine.
Like,
it's fine.
This is the ultimate toxic Christianity to me. Sure. This is, I think, the battery behind the toxicity of Christianity is the way that pastors like this, Skip is far from the only one. He's just the one that posted about First Kings on YouTube. So I came across him. You know, this is what Christians are hearing in churches. So then he started talking a little bit about God, how God revealed the successor to David. And here's what he has to say about that.
What we learn from Scripture is that God revealed to David who the king after him would be. Would not be Absalom, would not be Amnon, would not be Adonijah. It would be Solomon. God revealed that to him. You say, well, where do you find that at? So in 1 Chronicles chapter 22, I'm reading it to you. You can just write it in the margin of your Bible so you know. 1 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 9, God said to David, behold, a son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest, man of peace. I will give him rest from all his enemies all around. His name shall be Solomon, for I will give him peace and quietness to Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name. He shall be my son. I will be his father. I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. God told that to David. We find out David told that to Bathsheba, but not to anybody else. Again, that was a mistake. He should have announced his succession plan well in advance, should have told Nathan the prophet, should have told the mighty man, this is what's going to happen, this is what the Lord said. Evidently, he didn't want to let the cat out of the bag because he knew that the oldest son in line for the throne, Adonijah, could start a rebellion, so he probably kept it to himself out of fear. Well, guess what? He didn't even tell anybody that Solomon would be the king, and there was still a rebellion by Adonijah.
I fucking hate this guy.
A rebellion? He threw a party.
Yeah, he did.
And it's not a rebellion if you truthfully think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
A rebellion would have been if...
He didn't even put up a fight after he found out.
That's what I was going to say. A rebellion would have been finding out and then being no, we're moving forward with it.
Which, again, haven't gotten to the next episode yet.
True.
So we'll see. But you're right. Like I said, this is a really toxic part of Christianity because this is how Christians keep getting lied to by the church. How do we know that God told David, oh, I'll just throw to Chronicles, a writing that comes 700 years after the story took place, and he doesn't mention it at all. And the part of Chronicles doesn't mention Adonijah at all. The only thing Chronicles says about David's other kids is this: all the leaders and the mighty warriors and also all the sons of King David pledged their allegiance to King Solomon. 1 Chronicles 29:24. That's all it says about it.
Yeah.
But let's not bring any of that up.
No.
Let's not explore any of the actual mysteries of the Bible.
When you were reading the Bible as a youth, did you know that Chronicles was written that far?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
So it's safe.
I had no idea why. And, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the information, like, I'm sure the information is in, like, if you open up an NIV study Bible, at the beginning of each book, there's a description about the book and, like, what, in theory, what we know about it. But a lot of that stuff lies to you, too. A lot of that stuff is giving you the Christian perspective on it, which is literally straight up lies.
Right.
So
it's safe to assume that anybody sitting in Skip's church isn't doing deep dives into biblical history.
Right. And that's what this is supposed to be, because this isn't even like from his regular Sunday sermons. This is from like a Wednesday night Bible.
Yeah, I noticed you said write things in the margins of your Bible.
Yeah.
So I assume everyone's sitting there with Bibles and a pencil.
Right. This is like a special Bible sermon, a special Bible
but
service.
It's still, because they're reading the Bible and not diving into outside sources and biblical history, they wouldn't necessarily even realize, unless told and believing, I guess is the other half of that, that the Chronicles was written so much longer after.
Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of getting at with that, is that you would think if this is supposed to be like a night where we're really going to be diving deep into the Bible and talking about it as a congregation, and it's, he starts off the video. I didn't put it in there, although it's hilarious. He talks about, like, if you're not into reading the Bible, you should just leave now, basically. It's like, if you're not, just don't do it while you're in the middle of it. Like, if you were coming and you're like, oh, I don't want to read from the Book of Kings, from the Old Testament or something like that, just leave now. And, but this is for people who really care about the Bible and stuff. But then he doesn't give them the historical context.
No, because,
because that would actually give you truth.
Right.
That would actually give you truth. But he does give us some different details.
So Adonijah has a barbecue, a feast, I'm king party. Look at me, crown me king invitation to everybody except Solomon and the people loyal to David. They're left out. It tells us where it took place. Now, this is where I wish I had you right now in Jerusalem, because I would be able to point out where Adonijah did this. So in Jerusalem, when you go down to the city of David, where Jerusalem first started, and you can actually stand in the palace, what they believe to be the palace of King David. They've discovered it. You can look down into the valley, the Kidron Valley, and on the other side of the Kidron Valley is an Arab village called Siloam, and there's a rocky escarpment, kind of a sharp face, where two valleys meet. The Kidron Valley and the Hinnom Valley. Where they meet, there is another spring called the spring, or En Rogel. And on that rock that you can still see today is where this feast took place. So it wasn't far from David's palace. It wasn't far from the city of David. Just outside the city wall, just across the valley. If we were there, I could point it out to you today.
So, that's important to know, that Skip knows where this is and all, but wouldn't it serve somebody better to actually provide the historical context of when these writings were, instead of telling them like, oh, we know exactly where this party took place? I mean, a really good pastor could do both.
Right.
But like, I just kind of want to call it out that this is what Skip is sharing with them. Like, oh, we know exactly where this party happened.
Because it feels like he has knowledge that adds weight to his
that validates that it happened and all that stuff. Right. Instead of actually giving the historical context that like brings up the question of, is this actually accurate?
Right.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to call out that this is not being a good pastor.
I know.
This is being a shit pastor.
I know.
Like, it's just, this is the thing that like infuriates me, because it's like, I really am, I have a lot of anger inside me around the pastors that lied, straight up lied to me growing up when they knew this stuff and never said it from the pulpit. They never just told their people like, hey, this is where this happened. Like, let's keep in mind what the context is as we read this or anything like that.
I imagine like somewhere within Skip, like he feels like what he's doing is right. So I don't want to like villainize him or anything, although I wish he would stop talking.
Yeah.
But when they lie and when they won't disclose things that they know may challenge people in their beliefs, like to me, it feels like they don't actually believe
themselves.
Yeah. Or that because the whole idea of faith and then the thing they fucking use all the time is like, well, you just have to believe. Like you have to have faith when people do ask questions because some of it is unavoidable.
Yeah.
Right? Even through all of this stuff, there's just questions that are going to come up.
Yeah.
Especially from young people.
Right.
And they always say, well, you have to have faith. Like that's the whole like fucking base.
It's the whole point of faith.
Right.
Is to keep you believing even when you have evidence
against. So why lie?
Them. Right.
Why omit stuff that would challenge people's beliefs?
Right.
Don't you want the faithful to be strong in their faith?
Exactly.
Why aren't you willing to challenge them?
Yeah.
To prove their strength?
This is the shit that all pastors learn in seminary.
Yeah.
They all learn this stuff and they still do not provide that information to their people because they think they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
And stuff. So yeah, and that's all I kind of wanted to cover with that stuff is just.
You're not allowed to use Skip anymore.
No.
I don't like this guy.
All right. Well, I know I don't like him either. And I did feel weird in this one, like propagating what I consider pretty hateful teachings. Especially when it came to the whole gender thing. But it's at the same time though, this is the stuff this is why it keeps being a problem in America.
It's true. No, that's true.
You know?
It's true. Our goal has never been with this podcast to be like, you should be an atheist.
Right.
Like, we don't care. If you want to be Christian, cool. Listening to this podcast is a bit weird for you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Josh comes off very preachy. Sometimes I sit here and I listen to you and I'm like, oh, well, Josh is just an atheist preacher.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
You know, and it's just the cadence you have in your voice and stuff like that. And but I hope people aren't listening to this feeling.
Well, I learned from the preachers.
Well, right. I just hope people aren't feeling preached to by us.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess that's my point in a bunch of really confusing sentences that I just said.
Yeah, that I'll edit out.
Yeah, thank you. Make it sound. Just take out all of the stuff before it and just put, we're not trying to preach to you. Even though Josh sounds like a really great sort of hardcore Christian preacher when he speaks.
Right. Thank you.
I don't know. A popular one. So, you know,
As long as I'm right.
Right.
That's all that matters.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so next time on BSFA, more Adonijah drama. Mm-hmm. And David will die a second time because we already covered it previously. They all lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us grow the audience by sharing us with your friends or giving us a share on social media. And we love hearing from you. You can reach out on our website at bsfa.cc.
Oh, Daddy.
Oh, my God.